Hey guys, so today we have a special guest. It's Mikey, or BuzzTune, as some of you guys know him. And unfortunately, he can't be on camera. And we're just going to talk, and I'm going to put his picture up whenever he's talking instead. So today's topic, we're talking about how to prepare your rentals, especially if vacant, for the winter. And since we're both in the same market, it'll be an apples to apples comparison. Mikey, how old are your buildings?
Well, two are in the 1950s and one is in the 1930s.
Okay. Yeah, I don't remember what mine are. I think one's in the 1850s, another one's 1870, and I think the last the newest one's 1890. So there's a bit of difference in how you treat them for weather and stuff.
Wow, your newest one is in the 1890s.
Yeah,
Wow.
but so let's start with you. What do you do in order to prepare your house for your house for a vacancy in winter?
Honestly, I wanted to have this topic so that it would be a learning experience for me since I'm in Hawaii and I rely on property management. So they do a lot of the management in terms of preparing winterizing a property for vacancy.
Okay. Do you know what all they do?
I I only know general things, but that's why I wanted to kind of learn from you because you're in the market, you know the market, and on a much deeper level than I do, especially in terms of winter. So that's why I was kind of wanted to go over this topic just to understand a little bit better in terms of plumbing. How do you winterize for plumbing is probably one of the main things. And I know the basement in terms of insulation or even in the attic, like those things matter for the tenant. So I was just kind of curious on your thoughts.
So what I do is, especially for a vacancy, if there's a tenant in there, I don't worry so much about insulation in the ceiling other than just having something up there. I don't really worry too much about it. If it's vacant, like there's been a couple times where I've been working on properties and stuff during the winter. What I'll do is I turn off the main supply for that unit and I drain the water out every time. And then I'll run a dehumidifier just because I always do. And I'll set the thermostat on like 50 or 55 degrees. I mean, 5 degrees difference isn't going to be that huge or massive in a gas bill. And honestly, that's really about it. And then before it gets rented out, I'll have the plumber or the HVAC company come in and go through and get the furnace and stuff ready. Like Matt, the lumberjack landlord, talks about all that kind of stuff. And that way it's fresh and clean and ready to go and just go from there. If there's
I
cold
want to
spots,
ask,
I'll have like little space heaters in with them, and make it part of the lease where the tenant is responsible to make sure that they work and leave them in those areas.
for maintenance, do you prepare your HVAC just to get an annual service, maybe in the summertime, just for preparation for the winter?
I try to. I sometimes forget, but I need to honestly still get them done for this year. I'm kind of running behind schedule.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to figure out as well. I just did annual maintenance on my HVACs, but I think in the future I wanted to try to set it up earlier in the year, just so I could be prepared if there is noticeable type of failures that I could address that earlier instead of waiting till the winter where maybe the HVAC companies will be more expensive
Mhm.
because it may be more in demand like Lumberjack talks about.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too. I really kind of dropped the ball on it this year because ultimately I would have liked to have had it done in August and like finishing up a lot of the outdoor projects and stuff, but because of different things that happened throughout the year, it was just one thing after another, and different projects got pushed back later and later. And I'm still trying to get done outdoor projects that were supposed to be done like 2 months ago, and we're halfway through November already.
Because you know how Lumberjack he talks about his winters are really harsh. In
Hmm.
comparison, what do you think Pittsburgh winters are like?
Probably halfway between you, or probably halfway between him and Hawaii. But like I'm being honest, it's probably like a good halfway point because we see a lot of the same temperatures and the same, but he sees a lot of more longer streaks of cold and some negative, a lot more negative, and we can see all that. But a lot of times we run just anymore. It's like we run in the 20s and the 30s for most of the winter, which I mean that's more than enough to cause a lot of trouble with your house. Don't get me wrong. But like it's here in Pittsburgh, we don't get all the pounding of snow like he does. Like
Mm.
if we had a storm that hit us and then them, more than likely, if it's that big of a storm, it's going to hit both of us. We would probably see like 8 inches here, and he'd probably see like a foot and a half, maybe even more.
Wow. Okay.
And then there in Hawaii, you guys don't have a winter.
Yeah, it's pretty much seasonal. It's not seasonal at all. It's just pretty moderate weather throughout the entire year. It does get a little bit colder, but you guys would laugh at us calling, you know, winter weather in Hawaii cold, honestly.
Yeah, it must be horrible to still be out able to go out on the beach.
Does does the rivers freeze over in the winters for Pittsburgh?
Yeah, yeah, they usually freeze over.
Oh,
And that's another thing you do too. You just reminded me when you're doing work, a common thing we do here, especially if you have external like plumbing that runs along the wall, is we'll set our pipes to trickle, and it's good to actually let the hot water drip a little bit more than the cold water because will the hot water pipe will actually emit some warmth in that area and help keep the cold pipe if it's close enough from freezing too. I mean, granted, you need both of them to drip a little bit,
so water does your water bills tend to go up a little bit in the winters because of that?
but it's not that much. It really depends on where you're at because like there's some places like I know that just give you like you pay within certain brackets, and I feel like where you're at is probably more of that system. And then there's others that charge more or less by the gallon, which is one of
And
the areas I'm at, which I don't really like.
I see. And another thing I was curious about is what about tenant safety? Because you know, with Pittsburgh being a little bit hilly, with the winter weather, is there kind of prone for slippage and falling?
I um I have a contract with a landscaping company where if it snows or it gets icy or at all, that they could just go out and salt, shovel whatever it needs. Like there's times where it's just flurries, and I tell them go out and salt. Oh, a big thing is your outside spigots. You want to leave them open, but turn them off from the inside of the house. That way, there's no water to freeze inside of the pipe.
Uh, And for basements, if there's windows in the basements, do you go with the more efficient windows to insulate the basement just because all the plumbing is down there?
So none of my rentals have windows that have plumbing nearby, so I'm not too worried about that. However, my parents' house is like that, and what we did there, I would honestly just do the same thing on a rental, which is what we did was we got some of that just cheaper, just cheaper foam insulation, like the stuff you buy in sheets. It's not super
Mhm.
high R valued, and we put it up against the window on the inside and kind of made it like a little frame where you can't tell that there's even a window there exactly anymore. And on the other side, on the outside now, we put like a little, we then put the more styrofoam on the outside as well. And then we built like a little, like a little table made out of, like pressure treated 4x4s and deck boards and stuff. And we put rock on top of that. So it looks like it's part of the mulch rock garden right there. But meanwhile, there's a window right there if you ever wanted to open it up.
Okay.
A lot of people don't do that though. And honestly, if you get like they have those window guard things, sometimes people put those in and they seem to help out some. I I just we like at my parents' house, they always had problems with that one window. So that's why we did it that way and did it so excessively.
And, and when we were talking in the past, one thing that surprised me was you said you have found your best tenants in the winter.
Yeah, there's always people looking for a place to live. So I mean, yeah, we're not going to have as many great options, but you can still find good people, good tenants to. Do you have any other questions?
In my brain, I think that's all that I can think of right now. I just know when I look at the market every day, that's the one thing I try to keep in mind because I notice some properties there's like tons of stairs, and that's something I just try to avoid. I just I just would rather not get too deep into those properties, just because I think of the tenant and during the winter how it could be more difficult for them, especially if there's no garage and it's off-street parking only. So that's one of the things I think about.
I try to leave them responsible for their own areas, especially if they're parking by the street, because there's no way I should be held accountable for them falling if they're next to their car on the street.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, if you don't have any other questions, we'll wrap this episode up and go to episode two.
Yeah, it's very critical just talking about the weather and what the investors keep in mind.
Yeah, it's just more just use common sense. Try to get yourself security any way you can. Have your systems put in place. Have everything prepped and ready to go for winter. But overall, it's not really that hard. The one thing I wish I would have done differently so far, and I think as I see more vacancies, I'm going to install these, is those water monitor systems that if it sees so much water come through, it shuts the water off to the house. I'm going to start installing those.
Oh,
That's about the only thing up to this point that I would have done differently.
yeah. And I think it's such a great idea where Lumberjacky talks about adding ball valves underneath vanities or any type of water source. I think that's a great
Hmm.
idea, just for the tenant security and just hey, you got a leak, close it right up there at the ball valve. And I've joked about this before, but I hate gate valves. Gate valves are the absolute worst because every time I touch them, I don't know what happens to me, but they always leak right after I touch them.
Yeah, I like the quarter turn ball valves. They're nice.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's it for this episode. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Jack's Business Talk.